is a remake of a 1959 film of the same name. And I know there's going to be some people coming out going, but Jackson, that movie's a remake of the 1920s film, and even that film is a remake of a book called Ben-Hur. I know, but what's the first thing you think of when I say Ben-Hur? It's the 59 film. That's the most famous version, and that's probably the only reason why Hollywood decided to make a new adaptation of the book, because they remembered how successful that 59 film was, so they decided they could probably recreate that for the modern era. This movie still focuses on the Jewish prince character of Judah Ben-Hur, played by Jack Houston, and his adopted Roman brother, Masala, played by Toby Kebbell. And they're really tight, they're really good brothers, but Masala feels that his family doesn't really treat him that well, so he goes off into the Roman army for 3 years, and he comes back and realizes that even though he and Judah are kind of tight, that Judah isn't willing to help him out with something. And after Judah is accused of attacking someone very important in the Roman army, he's just like, you know what, I know you're innocent, but I'm just gonna send your family away, and I'm gonna send you to be a galley slave. And after that, Judah Ben-Hur decides that he wants revenge against his former brother. I watched the 1959 Ben-Hur not too long ago before seeing the new film, and I gotta say, I love it. And it's not just because it's a classic and I have to love it. No, it actually is an amazing film that still holds up to this day. Even if it is 3.5 hours long, it is still an incredible film. And I wish I had seen that film earlier when they originally announced this remake, because I think I would have been a lot more pissed, because that film is so perfect, there's no need to remake it, it still holds up to this day, but they decided to remake it anyways, and the trailers looked hilariously awful. Like, I automatically thought that this is probably going to be the worst film of the summer. I gotta say, walking out of this movie, it's not the complete abomination I thought it was going to end up being, mainly because of the relationship between Masala and Ben-Hur. Jack Houston and Toby Kebbell, I think they did a really good job together. They really sold me on their relationship of, after being through some circumstances, they are now brother rivals. Especially Masala as a character. I think not only Toby Kebbell did a good job as the role, but I think they actually improved upon the character, because not only did they have the thing where Judah won't help him out, but they also showed how the Ben-Hur family wasn't too kind to Masala and what the other people in the Roman army think of him, so they actually fleshed him out a little bit more, which I actually appreciate. And there's one segment where they do a flashback to show what his character has been through in the Roman War. It's not very long, but that easily was some of the better directed action in the whole film. That and an opening race between Ben-Hur and Masala. It's not an action scene, it's literally just them riding horses like, hey, we're good brother friends, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but that wasn't supposed to be nail-biting or suspenseful or anything, but that was easily better than some of the action scenes in this whole film. But since that was the opening of the movie, I thought, you know, maybe this movie can actually have some well-directed stuff, and it didn't. The director of this movie, his name I cannot pronounce, but I will say that he's directed films such as Wanted and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. With that being said, you should probably know how the directorial style is going to work in this film. And I gotta say, I was not a big fan of it, especially since it was in 3D. His style did not help the 3D at all. I literally just started to get a headache. My eyes felt so watery at one point. It was really hard to focus on. I never took off my glasses at any point, so I guess it's not horrible, but still, it was headache-inducing. Because his main style is either cut constantly between people, do some random zoom-ins every once in a while, or just constantly have the camera never be still, have it always be shaking around. And that really works against this movie, especially with the action scenes. Two famous scenes in particular, the naval fight and the chariot race. The first one on the boat. In the 1959 film, that scene was actually really well done, but in this movie, it really doesn't work, not only because of the constant zooms that I mentioned and cuts and shakiness everywhere, but the CGI is really horrible. There's a moment where they do that zoom in outside the window and they show this fake water that all the boats are on, see the CGI rowers in the water. It really does look awful, especially since I watched the 59 one, and knowing that a film that came out years before this film looks better, that's really strange to say. Because you could tell they were actually on water. They might not actually be at sea, but they're actually on water. They're actually on a boat. Heck, they even show some of the battles on top of the boat instead of below deck. In this movie, it's entirely below deck, and you can tell that they're only on a boat set. They probably only constructed the below deck part. They probably didn't even do the top part, and you can tell they're just easily on a green screen. There's no other boat model surrounding them, just green screen. They're in a studio the whole whole time, and it really looked atrocious. And some of the CG in the chariot race as well, including the horses whenever they topple over, and especially one horse that got out into the stadium, started running up the crowd, that looked horrifying, especially since I know now that animals can look extremely realistic, like in the Jungle Book. The animals in that movie look photorealistic. So now my standards on CGI animals is a little higher, and I see these CGI horses in the chariot race, and oh goodness, that's some pretty bad stuff. And speaking of the chariot race scene in the 59 film is one of the best scenes of all time. You wanna know why? Because it's not focused on being flashy. The majority of the camera work in that scene in the original film is still, you can take in everything that's happening. So when something kind of suspenseful happens, like for instance Judah Ben-Hur flips over the chariot, you're actually like, oh crap, I feel bad for this guy, I want him to survive, because you can actually see what's going on. And in this movie, constant cuts between people, you get some annoying dialogue too in this film. You even get some CGI dust so you can't even fully see what's happening on screen. You have an obnoxious score going on in the background. Add that in with the CGI and the shaky cam too. It just really didn't work. The chariot race was really butchered in this film. Even when action scenes weren't taking place in this movie, the drama element, because the 59 film is an epic, a drama action story, the drama isn't even that interesting here. In this film, it just felt completely dull and lifeless. I don't know if this is a problem for anyone else, but did anyone else think that the filming cinematography was just kind of cheap? I know this is like $100 million movie, and I definitely know they spent money on it because I see CGI everywhere. The way the movie was shot just made it seem extremely cheap. I don't know if that's just a problem with me, or if that's with everyone else as well. And here's the thing, this movie needs to be 3.5 hours long. The 59 film was 3.5 hours long, and I gotta say that amount of time flew by quite a bit. It actually is an interesting story. There's a lot going on for me to always be interested in. So when I saw that the runtime of this movie was 2 hours and 4 minutes, I thought, how were they able to cut out so much to make it, I guess, better for modern audiences because they don't want to see a 3-hour movie? They cut out so much to the point where the plot really did feel jumbled, because you can tell there was something else supposed to be there, but they had to cut it out so the time wouldn't be so long. And what they kept in there really wasn't that interesting. They cut out a lot of significant things that characters did in the original film that probably could have made it better. They cut out a huge element of the original film that I thought would have made it even more dramatic. It's one of the most dramatic parts of the 59 film, but now they have a little element of it there, but the big thing that I really enjoyed from the 59 film is gone. A huge chunk of the movie is gone. And I know I mentioned this guy earlier, but I need to bring him up again. Jack Houston, I liked him at first when he's with his family, when he's still a prince, and he's talking clearly. I can understand his dialogue, until he becomes a galley slave, and then all of a sudden his voice turns to this. He's growling, his voice so deep and gruff. Oh, I'm a slave, I'm Judah Ben-Hur, I need to fight Masala in a chariot race, Morgan Freeman, help me. It's like, oh my god, I could understand you so clearly earlier, but now, like, at the drop of a hat, you're doing this voice? Why? It really didn't make sense to me. And Morgan Freeman, I love the dude, but in this movie you can definitely tell this is a phoned-in performance. He needs to pay for something. He's in debt of some kind, needs to do this movie to make some sort of cash. Like, there's one moment where Jack Houston is telling him like a wink wink nudge nudge kind of line, and he smiles, and then they cut to Morgan Freeman, and his reaction to what he just said is literally just a dead stare. Like, he definitely could tell, like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, or I guess I'll just stare at you. And Rodrigo Santoro is playing Jesus in this movie, and in the 59 film, I think they handled the Jesus element a little bit better, because I know, you can't cut out Jesus. I'm not saying you're supposed to, because he plays an important part in the story. The Ben-Hur story is happening around the same time as the Jesus crucifixion, so obviously you can't just cut out Jesus. But in the 59 film, they didn't make a big deal that he was actually in the movie. Like, his first introduction was like an hour into the film, and they didn't even show his face. In fact, I don't think they showed his face at all in that movie, and it's him helping Ben-Hur drink water. I don't even think he said anything. But in this movie, since we have Rodrigo Santoro playing him, now there has to be a scene earlier in the film where he's just randomly talking to Ben-Hur because he's conveniently walking by him working on something, like, oh, hey, Ben-Hur, it's me, Jesus. Do you want me to talk about something kind of religious or something? And then there are a couple other moments throughout the movie where we're focusing on Ben-Hur and his story, then all of a sudden we get a random cut to Jesus again doing something, and it's like, we really didn't need this. The story should be about Ben-Hur, his revenge story. That's the most important part. So you randomly just cutting to Jesus just to give him more screen time, I guess, really isn't necessary. I would talk about the rest of the cast in this movie, but I could just tell that they probably weren't that good anyways because they're audio dubbed. Like, I was looking so closely at their lips at some part, and what their lips are saying is not matching up what I'm actually hearing. Like, some parts in the movie, the dialogue is louder than what's actually happening around them, and some parts it doesn't even seem like they're saying anything, but you hear dialogue coming out, and you see a tiny lip move, so you're like, oh, I guess you're saying something. And my final flaw with this movie is the ending. Now, a lot of people are gonna say, well, this movie has the same ending as the original, right? Because it's the same movie? No. It's kind of the same, but they add in some new things. So without spoiling anything, I will say that this movie is very Hollywood happy ending. Like, all that was missing was for all the characters to link arms and smile while a freeze frame happens and a rainbow forms in the background. That's how cliched, generic happy ending this movie's ending was. Like, oh my god. The ending of this movie really does screw the movie over in the end. It really is appalling. And I'm not saying the 59 film has the best ending of all time or anything. It's a good ending, but this film was really too generic, too happy ending. So overall, this Ben-Hur remake is really bad. I would not recommend this movie to anyone, even if you're a big super fan of the original film. Definitely don't see this movie. You will think that they completely butchered it. But I will say that it isn't the complete abomination that I thought it was going to be, so I'm going to give Ben-Hur a D+. Jack Huston and Toby Kebbell together were great. I like what they did with the Masala character in this film, and some moments were well directed, but it's just the remainder of the movie wasn't well directed. The drama element was dull and lifeless. The ending of this movie is garbage, and what they did to the naval fight scene and the chariot race scene is really sickening. But if you've seen Ben-Hur, the remake, leave in the comments below of what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time. And walking out of this movie, I will say that it's not... Oh. Ooh, what is this right here? I'm sorry, I gotta have to move you. Oh my. What's this outside my window? Ooh, gnarly.